Well, hello, everybody. It is Friday night. What's the best thing about the weekend? No work. What makes a weekend even better? The return of the Cleveland Browns. And for what everybody else has been waiting for, the debut of Shador Sanders. I am Jeff Lloyd, host of Browns 3D here on the OBR streaming network. We will also have Brad Ward, our host here of the React, our host here of All Eyes on Cleveland. And certainly on Friday nights, you get Things I Think I Know. So you should get an episode of Browns 3D. You should get an episode of Things I Think I Know. So I'm going to be here. Brad's going to be here. We're going to give some thoughts here before we kick this off here. A little less than an hour now. Um, Obviously, this time of year, I think we all kind of get into our bag a little bit. Everybody starts getting, right, a little bit excited. We've had football away from us for so long, well over 8 months now that football has not been a part, at least the game of football. And certainly the offseason began with Myles Garrett and how that situation came to pass, of course. And then free agency, some trades, the draft. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I can just pontificate on how this entire 2025 season is going to work for the Cleveland Browns. There's a lot of things that would need to go right for this team to achieve some success this year. So I'm not saying it can, certainly, but it all begins here tonight, Friday night, August 8th, in Carolina versus the Panthers. Obviously, first things first, and there will be a not, this has been something that, I think a lot of people have kind of been discussing the last couple of days about, when it first came out that the Browns are not going to, be playing a lot of their top talent. Greg Newsome, we know he's dinged up with the shoulder. Greg's entrenched as the starting outside corner right now. You tell me starters aren't playing, I would assume that it means Greg Newsome. Jerry Jeudy, nice of him to put Deshaun Watson's name on this list. He's not starting either or playing either. As we know, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, both nursing their hamstring injuries. The hope is that both will be ready to go for next week. Grant Delpit has been, dinged up a little bit, been returning to practice the last few days, but, Grant is one of the top players on the Browns defense. Grant Delpit will not be in action this evening. Joe Flacco, as far as I can tell, I know some people still want to make this Kenny Pickett thing a thing that he might actually be the starter. I just don't see how it works. David Bell still out injured, so not a part tonight. Cedric Tillman, I know he was a player that people were certainly about whether or not Cedric Tillman should be playing in this game. My defense to that is Cedric Tillman was hurt his final year at Tennessee. Cedric Tillman was hurt his first year with the Browns. Cedric Tillman was hurt last year. You need Cedric Tillman to step up here and be a pretty significant part of this offense. And it's that 3-game stretch, certainly, that we go back to last year in 2024, where you kind of saw what the ultimate high of Cedric Tillman would be. Browns need that player. And, him getting dinged up here certainly would not help this team in any way whatsoever. Running back Pierre Strong will not be playing. Denzel Ward, obvious. Running back Jerome Ford is not playing as well. Mahmoud Diabate, he's been a little dinged. He's out. Mike Hall has not returned to practice yet, so he is out, of course. The offensive line, Posick, Batonio, Teller, Conklin, DeJuan Jones, none of them are playing. This is probably going to be one of the bigger storylines of this game is, what can the reserve offensive line do? And, can they certainly hopefully give Shador Sanders time to operate, maneuver? Reserve at offensive guard Zach Zinter is also not playing. Zach got hurt earlier in the week, didn't even make the trip to Carolina. David Njoku not playing. Shelby Harris not playing. Myles Garrett not playing. Malik Collins not playing as well. Now, one of the questions I had today, and we were actually chatting a little bit, us and the rest of the OBR guys, it was, when you say that maybe the starters aren't playing, I was wondering where that was going to fit Mason Graham and where that was going to fit, of course, Carson Swessinger. Both of those guys are in uniform. I do not know what that means as far as the level of how much each one of them are going to play. But I think, that certainly adds to the excitement for everybody because, you know, this year and whatever it becomes, and if they do find a way where it actually becomes successful, it'll probably be because this offensive line, I mean, this rookie class really kind of just took strides quickly. And, Mason Graham, where he was drafted, obviously entrenched to be a starter and hopefully an early contributor on the interior defensive line. And, with the quarterback situation the way it's been, Mason Graham's probably not really gotten the amount of publicity that you would normally get being a first round pick, somebody that was drafted that high, but certainly excited to get Mason Graham going. Carson Swessinger is your Mike linebacker, and it happened quickly, obviously, the selection of him, and then finding out, after OTAs that, Jeremiah Usu-Koromo was not going to be a part of this team this year. Then 2 days into training camp, getting the word that, Jordan Hicks, after 10 years, decided that that was enough for him. And, 10 years in the league is certainly enough for anybody. And then all of a sudden, second round pick Carson Swessinger just basically went from a guy that really looked like he could be something for this team to all of a sudden now, you're starting Mike linebacker. You'll probably see him out there run around with, Devin Bush. Probably getting to see a little Jerome Baker as well. And again, just because, top picks are playing doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play a ton. And, I think it's probably good for Mason Graham. It's probably good for Carson Swessinger that they've kind of gotten to go under the radar to this point because nobody is talking about anything to this point other than the quarterback position. Obviously, a lot of those things are going to be eliminated here this evening. And with the premise that it believes that Shador Sanders is going to get maybe somewhere around 50 snaps, and Brad Ward has now jumped in here. I mean, Brad, obviously there's a lot we're looking for here as is the opener, the beginning of the preseason. And look, there's a lot of guys here that definitely going to draw the eyes here. But there is no bigger person that the eyes are going to this evening other than number 12, Shador Sanders.
Yeah, it's I was saying last night, it's his mom spaghetti moment, right? And yeah, so he gets one shot here. Obviously he'll get more than one shot, but it is a rather large moment. And it came up on him fast, but it's super exciting. I can't remember a preseason game having this much meaning in that, or this much excitement around it. I'm interested to watch his protection. I'm concerned a little bit about that. You went through the players who aren't playing. Who is playing on the offensive line tonight?
That's where it's going to get a little bit wonky, Brad. Let's be completely honest with you. Obviously, Cornelius Lucas, I'm assuming, is going to be your starting left tackle. And let's be honest, that's not a terrible option to be having here for Shador Sanders.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yes, that is fine. I believe Luke Whippler will be his, will be his center. And again, that's not a terrible thing either because, with Shador not getting reps with the ones, the last thing we want to see, and this is going to be one of the biggest parts of all of this tonight, is, and I don't want everybody to get down, but like there's some simplistic of things that you're hoping for here. Getting out of the huddle quickly. Shador getting to the line, everybody lined up, being able to get through his pre-snap reads, getting the ball snapped cleanly. Like, I know it sounds very, almost maybe toddlerish, but,
no,
those are before we get to any action and, before Shador's even able to, throw the ball anywhere. Obviously, we got to get through all of that stuff. And
the procedural aspect of playing quarterback is kind of one of the things that he was behind a little bit of Gabriel on, right? Is the in and out of the huddle, the calling the plays, just the procedural aspect of it all. I feel like he's caught up some, but we're going to find out tonight because, play clock violations, pre-snap penalties. Obviously, there was a ton in the joint practices, but, avoiding that stuff would be a huge victory. And just to let him get a chance to just play ball would be huge, right? So,
and I think that's why I really like, and look, this is probably the way the situation just came about. You were never playing, Joe. You're trying to give Dylan and Kenny Pickett here every chance that you can. So you're not going to make them go out there when they're not 100%. And then you're hoping by Monday they're hopefully back to a full regular routine. But for Shador, and let's not get nervous if the first drive or maybe even the second drive get off a little wonky, because it
Yeah.
looks like he's pretty much got most of this game. I mean, when you say the number 50, I mean that could conceivably mean that Snoop Huntley doesn't even play at all tonight. Because I mean, if you're going to get to 50 reps on offense, that probably means that the offense actually got cooking a little bit. Because I mean,
Yeah.
50 snaps over 4 quarters, in a preseason game would mean that, obviously they were able to maybe get a sustainable drive or two going.
Yeah.
We've certainly gotten to see, last night and, last week here, what you get to see in some of these early preseason games. And, they're by no means, going to be hung in the Louvre, but
Right.
that's not necessarily what they're for. These guys are supposed to go out there, get their work in. I do think, for Shador, having a guy like Deontay Johnson in this situation is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Jamari Thrash, who's been pretty strong the entire spring and thus far this summer, is pretty strong. And right now, when you look at the way the Browns are viewing this wide receiver room, the competition maybe necessarily is between Deontay Johnson and Cedric Tillman. They're looking to maybe give Jamari Thrash this opportunity to be the slot guy. Anybody can really go in there, but it seems like Thrash is the guy they're kind of grooming to be that guy. Lavar Dane, who's kind of had a little bit of thing going with everybody, is really somebody that I think we should kind of keep our eyes on, because it's, and I'm just using Victor Cruz from years ago with the Giants. Like, in order
Sure.
to get your chance, you've got to be able to find a way to contribute every time you're called. And for a while it was, well, who is this 84 guy? Can we get a shot of his back so at least we can get the dang last name right and make sure, because we got wide receivers wearing 37, we got wide receivers wearing 31. I think there was a guy out there last week, they cut him though, Winston Wright, who was wearing like 38 or 39.
38. Yep.
Yep. But you got Gage Laverdane, who's really just kind of made a name for himself. And, so to go from quiet UDFA to all of a sudden maybe now be in contention to maybe find a way to the 53, this is that next step. You've got to get in there, and in these game type of situations, these preseason games, you've got to find a way to contribute. And with everyone commenting, well, oh, he's not playing with anyone. If he hasn't really played with the ones yet, then this is going to be the decision of whether or not he's ready for that. He goes in here, gets some points on the board, completes some passes, doesn't get, fooled into a mistake or two where he just didn't see something, or has an Anthony Richardson moment from last evening where it was just simplistic football that he should have known since high school. And those are the things I'm maybe not necessarily concerned with Shador, because I think once it gets in there, and we're not talking, I mean, he's played an extremely large amount of football. And I think for Shador, who hasn't played a legit game since December, he's just got to be foaming at the mouth right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, the opportunity, the stage, kind of a national stage here, because I think it's on NFL Network. So you're going to get
Absolutely.
this out to everybody. People are going to be watching. People want to see him get his shot here, and it's a big moment for him, and a chance to, I think, with a good performance, kind of solidify himself as potentially like ahead of Gabriel moving forward. And I think that's kind of what's on the line here. As those guys come back from injuries and we see where everything lands next week. But certainly this opportunity to take, I don't know, how far you expect him to play? You said 50 snaps.
That's the number that they did the coaches show last night, and
Yeah.
Kevin Stefanski dropped that number. And again, that could mean the entire game. It truly
That
could.
could be into the fourth quarter, right? Yeah.
I mean, because 1 3 and out, and say Carolina sustains the ball, you could maybe get to where you only ran 8 or 9 plays, 10 plays tops in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Or there becomes, and this would be the interesting thing, what if it does go kind of well? And say Shador's 12 of 16. I don't think the yardage amount necessarily matters in that 12 of 16, the high completion amount would matter. Yards, the Browns are in double digits, do you say, you know what? Let's get you out of here on a high note.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? Let's not get you, because even still though, but then Shador will certainly be playing against, the Carolina Panthers future school teachers and assistant football coaches who will
Yeah.
no longer be making the team. So, but if he goes out there and has a nice start to it, then maybe it's, hey, this is perfectly well enough. And, we'll let Snoop Huntley finish up. But, I do want to bring up what you actually just mentioned, because I kind of been talking about this a little bit the last couple of days. Yes, there is sort of a quarterback competition for the Cleveland Browns, but it almost feels like there's two separate quarterback competitions as well. There's the Joe Kenny competition, and there has to be some sort of Shador Dillon competition as well.
Yeah.
Who's, basically the top rookie. And then there's the question of, if the Browns inherently go with Joe and say, you know what, we don't necessarily need Kenny at this point. Maybe his worth, is to find maybe there's a place for him. And then all of a sudden now you're talking about these two rookies competing against each other, but also finding a way to compete into that number 2 spot. And you hate it for Pickett and Gabriel. You do. But I'm also not a huge fan of these preseason games where it's, I don't need to see 3 and 4 quarterbacks, because I think unlike any other position, you really got to get in there and you really kind of got to just get a rhythm going. If you're a receiver and you play 2 to 3 quarters in one of these games, you're still out there. You're getting everything going, but you're a quarterback and you say, "Hey, I got a quarter. I got 15 snaps." It's really difficult to maneuver that way, especially when you're talking about, guys who, have been prominent quarterbacks at the collegiate level. And certainly times where Dylan Gabriel got hot in the fourth quarter to pull a game out. Shador Sanders, the same type of thing where, maybe the first 35 minutes of the game, it wasn't his night. The last 20 or so, all of a sudden, man, they found something, worked the, obviously worked the iPad, this, that, and the other thing, put something in, and then all of a sudden took off from there. So I think that's really a big, big opportunity for Shador here, is knowing that he's basically going to get the extended time here this evening. Because when you know that your number could be up quickly, you're trying to make a great moment as opposed to
Yeah.
just reacting and playing.
Yeah, there should be no need to feel pressed into needing to make a big play early. He just needs to make the right play, make quick decisions. I mean, these are the things we're looking for. And I think Pat Shea makes a good point. He needs some support around him too. Like he's gonna need now. He's going to need the offensive line to play well. He's going to need receivers to make catches, get open. He's going to need the run game, complementary football. All those things matter. But I have noticed in that in the past, and I ask you if you've kind of noticed this, Jeff, Stefanski in the preseason has really kind of just let his quarterbacks throw it. Somebody was going through the numbers and they were like 17 attempts in the first half, 18 attempts in the first half, 19 in the first. I don't know how much run to pass balance we'll see like we're expecting from this team in the regular season. They may just let them throw it so they can try to get a gauge of what they've got at wide receiver and how Shador handles it. That's just my thought. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do try to work the run game in a lot. I don't know. But in the past, he's had a tendency to kind of just let him gunsling a little bit in preseason.
Yeah, and actually, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head here. If you remember a couple of years ago, that was kind of what they were doing with DTR.
Yep.
And God, I remember he was wearing 80. He made the practice squad. He never came off the practice squad in 23. And then even before 24, he ended up going to Philadelphia. He never came out of anything, but certainly he had that summer that year with DTR. And, the Browns just kind of, and no offense, that's what you should be doing here. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? What do you think you are most comfortable with in the playbook right now? Because look, we want to make you feel good. We want you to have your confidence continue to grow, because, if you succeed, your confidence grows, then now we put more on your plate. That's the way this should work here, obviously. And, when you brought up earlier about being able to just get out and out of the huddle, Colorado was doing some different things. Your star offensive player, as far as a playmaker, was playing 120 snaps a game.
Yeah.
You basically told them you don't have to go to the huddle because there's no other way you're going to rest. So we're not making go in and out of the huddle, the offensive huddle every single time. We can handle this with a couple of hand signals, but that's not necessarily the way it's going to work in the NFL unless it's a 2-minute drill or you're purposely trying to go with a hurry up style, trying to keep the defense from making changes, this, that, and the other thing. But you're not going to be able to pull that off with a bunch of guys who have this limited amount of time together to this point. And the other thing where when you're talking about the throwing of it, we know Ford's not playing. You don't have Strong.
Right.
Obviously, Quinshawn Judkins, there's an update. I don't think it's favorable,
No.
obviously. It certainly sounds like, if the Browns were to get something going with Quinshawn Judkins, it's probably going to feel very disingenuous from the fan standpoint because it's maybe taking us back down a road again that we all don't want to get to. We'd like for this team to have a little bit of a cleaner image. That
Yeah.
black eye is never, it's 3 years now. And that, there's still shimmer of that black eye, obviously. So you're not going to go say, hey, Dylan Sampson, here's 15 carries on a, fourth round guy's legs. So
Yeah.
that gets you to the running backs after, the one just brought in, certainly from the UFL. And then there was certainly the undrafted free agent as well. And then, of course, Travion, the
Williams.
running, the Travion. I guarantee you he's going to get called Travion Henderson a lot by, so if he's around for a while, it's probably not going to work out for him. But Travion Williams could end up
Wishful
being the guy
thinking.
here who just sees, 12 to 13 touches because,
Yeah.
you're going to just basically tap out somebody who's probably not going to make the 53. We haven't even mentioned Harold Fannin yet, and I'm sure that's a name everybody is really, really excited for because his role at Bowling Green was offensive weapon.
Yes.
And that works perfectly here for, because Stefanski just, hey, I'd love putting 12 personnel on the field. And,
Yeah.
certainly the hope for Harold Fannin is you are going to get a better, more consistent version of a Harrison Bryant, who the Browns certainly were trying to will in to be that guy to make that 12 personnel work. So, besides Shador and, getting to see a little bit of Schlesinger and getting to see a little bit of Mason Graham and certainly Fannin and Sampson. And this is where, this team is kind of at right now. A lot of this team, a lot of this belief of where this team can be this year is certainly based on, what are the rookies bringing to this?
Yeah.
And you don't want to put pressure on them, but, it's a couple of years ago, we used to talk about the draft and be like, well, the Browns, there's not a lot of open spots anyway. It's not the case right now. Browns really need Mason Graham to hopefully come in and fortify that defensive line. Carson Schlesinger went from a guy at the time we all said, wow, linebacker, 33, huh? And here we are 3 months later, and basically he's got the keys to the castle.
Yeah, he looks like the real deal. He looks like a dog. He's got the green dot on already, which only I think is fantastic for the future, right? Like if you can put the green dot on somebody in the preseason of their rookie year and know that's where he's going to be moving onward and upward, I think your defense only benefits from that moving forward, right? So there's a lot to listen. There's a lot to watch on defense tonight. I mean, I think we're in a real battle at nickel and what's going to happen in the secondary as far as depth and at nickel. At safety is an interesting thing. Chris Edmonds has been getting a ton of reps in camp. Is he a threat to make this team? Is that a real thing? Is Cam Thomas a real thing, a real chance to make this team
Possibility at
because he's been
50 end.
getting
Yep.
reps with the Isaiah McGuires and the Alex Wrights of the world. So these are all things that I will be watching. Are any of the linebackers being held out tonight? Pache asked tonight, or are they on play? I think
Diabate's out.
Diabate is out. Okay. So Jerome Ford probably, or Jerome, sorry, Baker. Too many Jeromes. Jerome Baker and Schlesinger and Bush tonight. Now, Bush, I'm expecting to be suspended to start the season, right? So,
I mean,
um,
maybe. Well, I don't know. Maybe if we're going to say for the beginning of the season, but obviously Devin Bush has got something obviously pending. At some point can come down. Yes,
yeah, I think he'll at least get something
he's going to miss a
there.
little time. It seems like yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Schlesinger will be fun to watch. I kind of wish that Diabate was playing a little bit, but uh, you know, that secondary beyond the staples that we know that are there in Newsom and Ward is there's some question marks in how they're going to proceed here. Cam Mitchell hasn't really gone out and grabbed the nickel job. Can Miles Harden play well? He hasn't really done that either. Is this going to be a team that plays more three safety stuff and it's going to be Jenkins or KZ that's covering the slot most of the time? I don't know. That's stuff I'm going to be watching a lot tonight, and stuff that I tried to watch at camp too. I mentioned Chris Edmonds. He never left the field at camp when I was there. Now, I know Delpit's going through some kind of an injury thing. It's nothing major, but he wasn't out on the field. But can Hickman lock down a starting job? Is that real? I don't know. You know what I mean? I'd like to see this. I like KZ too, Jeff Tucker. I do. Um, so I like Jenkins too. I think both of the veterans that they brought in are locks to make the roster, and I think that they both present options that the Browns now need, Jeff, to cover the slot potentially. If you're going to go if you're going to go big nickel with two linebackers on the field, or you're going to go true dime, either way, I think both guys have done enough cover of the slot or played enough box safety in their career to cover. So it gives you additional options, whether it be big nickel or true dime on defense. That if you don't get the performance or the nickel play that you're looking for from um, Mitchell or Harden or Lemary, and maybe it's Lemarius James. You know what I mean? Their third highest priced UDFA. Um, you know, then maybe it's more of a safety. I don't know. I would love to see one of these cornerbacks step up though and just like
I
play really
I
well.
I'm actually shocked by the amount of conversation about the cornerback room that is not being had.
Yeah,
People, were, either, in or kind of really out on Martin Emerson. But the point is the Browns had three very experienced corners who took a lot of reps. And, as weird as this entire situation is for Greg Newsom, who is obviously close with Martin Emerson, and both were in this really weird scenario, both in contract years. Greg is, I think Greg has been a truly supportive teammate this entire last few years, but he has also not really shied away from the fact that, he would prefer to play on the outside, or even to the point where he said, I don't mind going inside, but if that's where the threat is. And certainly for Greg Newsom personally, if he has a good year on the outside, it certainly ups the potential payday for him, which,
yeah,
hey, we all got to worry about our own money. You know what I'm saying? We all got mouths to feed.
yeah,
So this has really been a weird situation for Greg where, now his friend is down. And obviously for Martin Emerson, this isn't a great spot to be in. But Greg kind of gets what he was being a good soldier about, but he kind of gets that opportunity back. But after this, I mean, look, Cam Mitchell has not played a ton for this team. Miles Harden barely participated last year. The Browns cornerback room right now, it's got some issues.
yeah,
And, there is no doubt in my mind that, come, that first official 53 or, right before a week before, 10 days before week one, that whatever becomes of, that 53 that goes into the Bengal game, there could be one, if not two cornerbacks who aren't even in Cleveland
Yeah.
right now, because they're going to give these guys the opportunity, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these guys are going to perform in a way where the Browns are going to feel comfortable enough to give them the opportunity once we go for real against the Bengals.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. If there is, if there are, this is one of the areas they need to be watching at cut downs, waiver wire, opportunity with the second highest waiver wire, priority, along with wide receiver and potentially tight end. I think those are kind of where I'm at with the positions to watch there. Um, I guess maybe depth at linebacker. I feel a little less strongly about that just because I think Tarver will get the best out of whoever's there. You know what I
He
mean?
always does.
Uh,
He always does.
um, but yeah, and you know, the this just how that takes shape. They always end up having to rely on their depth at corner.
Mhm.
And it's Denzel has averaged missed 4 games a year, and that's always been Greg Newsome, and that's made him valuable as his inside outside versatility. That's now already on the outside. So he can't cover both. So somebody is going to have to step in and play there and be able to cover there, and somebody's going to have to be able to step in the nickel and play and cover. So these games showing out here, as well as for the safeties, is huge. I think guys that have big games here, PBUs, interceptions, or look like there's some deterrent of throwing the ball their direction in preseason is massive. And then, we know the importance of the offensive side of the ball, right? And I hope Fannin gets touches. I want to see him get involved early, with Shador. Not somebody that he's always had at his disposal in practice and whatnot to this point, but somebody that it'll be out there tonight that he can look to and should be a target he should be able to find.
And that's the thing, because when we talk, and look, we've already saw it last night. You saw one of the former Colorado wide receivers of Shador's,
Yeah.
showing out, unfortunately, for the Baltimore Ravens. Um, but Shador, you watch the Colorado film, the one thing you don't see a lot of that, when you're trying to translate him to a Kevin Stefanski offense, is there really wasn't a lot of tight end work in Colorado. And so this is something for Shador. It's obviously, slightly different routes, of course. It's a lot more between the numbers. It's a lot more up the seam. And, Shador, they just wasn't, the way the Colorado offense was really kind of set up. So this could be something, that Shador grows into. And, we all know the line, tight end, quarterback's best friend. So this could be something where, a phase of Shador's game that he can grow upon. Well, certainly, if it goes well for him to the David Njoku levels, but at least for tonight, the Harold Fannin level, where you just have a guy with a little bit bigger of a body. And, you have to understand, you see the DB there, but, because he's bigger and he's longer, as long as you hit the correct spot with your ball, you should succeed. You should have an opportunity, to, get completions. That's why the tight end position exists, because it's just, you don't have 6'4", 250-pound defensive backs and, linebackers in the NFL. If they are that big, they're just not athletic enough. So this is something where Shador certainly can find, something for himself. Um, I think vanilla is probably the way it's gonna go. Because you're seeing they are doing a lot of the stuff. You know what I'm saying? But when Shador goes in, you're not seeing it as much. And that's because it's Shador and most of the younger guys. Um, Certainly somebody, if you see, 22 on the field, Dylan Sampson, I would say that is a guy you're certainly going to keep your eyes on, because he's been very gadgety, would maybe the word, Brad,
Yeah.
right? Where he's
Hmm.
lining up in wide receiver spots. He's lining up as a slot. He will do jet motions. So that's certainly somebody, to watch as far as doing that type of stuff. But again, you're trying to get Shador to show well. So you don't want to, and this is going to come down on the other 10 guys as well. You know what I'm saying? because if Shador's looking to his left and he's got a guy somewhere where they're not supposed to be, it's going to screw up everything. And,
Yeah.
basically, I don't know how much audible ability he's got, but then that's just everybody gets set and we're handing it off the right guard because we got
Yeah.
to get a playoff. So, that's, all the time. And everybody's got to be on the page. And look, for everything that Shador has been dealing with and from, in my opinion, overcoming, I think he should be able to go out there and run this. I don't know how much difficulties that I think he's going to go out and handle that aspect. The question is going to be, is everybody on the same page as far as following their leader?
Yeah.
That's going to be the big one. And look, for Lavardane, for Floria, these guys aren't being successful to this point without obviously being nose in the book as well and knowing where they're supposed to be lined up and knowing what their alignments are. So I have high expectations. I do. I think I don't see a reason why, if you told me it was week 2 or it was week 3, where maybe there's more talent going to be on the field.
Yeah.
If Shador Sanders, if anybody believes that Shador Sanders could ultimately possibly be a starting quarterback in the NFL, this is a week 1 preseason game. He should be able to handle this and show pretty well.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, I expect vanilla too. Not a ton of emotion. Well, I've been critical. It's one of the things I've been critical about is their lack of motion in the past couple of years, and there's been some reasons for that. They couldn't even get snaps off. Pre-snap penalties, etc. Different quarterbacks, the Watson thing, all that stuff. I don't even want to bring it up, but like all of that played into their ability to incorporate pre-snap motion. But it correlates directly to offensive success around the NFL, Jeff. I mean, it just does. So
And there were
you've
times where you saw play and you'd see like, oh, what was this motion? And you're like, what's coming? False start,
yeah,
74. It was like, well, all right, well, now the play's gone. We're never even going to see it because they
yeah,
sort of showed it, but didn't get to show it.
yeah. So, an uptick in that this year, I think, is due for the offense. Whether we'll see that tonight, probably a little less likely, with Sanders out there, but maybe a little bit. You know what I mean? Nothing crazy or anything, but shifts and motion and using that to gain leverage for stuff like Fannin
Mm-hmm.
and as you mentioned, at running back with
Samson.
Sampson, those things to gain leverage in situations and unfold the defense are critical, right? Like, and maybe they can do a little bit of that to help Shador, diagnose what he's seeing on the other side of the ball. Not that we're going to see heavily, disguised coverages here in preseason game 1, but still, zone, man, half field, whatever he's looking at, every little bit helps, right? So.
No question, no question. And we're not going to keep you guys here much longer. I know everybody wants to go, get a little food ready, get that pop ready. Look, at the end of this, this is a team that everybody here and certainly at the OBR and all of you fantastic people who come to the OBR every day, whether it is for the fantastic written content, whether it is for the OBR streaming network, or whether it's both. But real quick, make sure you go on over to the OBR.com. Look, there is never a better time to get the VIP subscription than probably right about now. Access to the insider forums, ask the insiders, all of these great things, that you can have at your disposal. I think we're all excited, and let's just remember either tonight, Shador Sanders goes into the Hall of Fame as a first ballot, or he's selling pizza by Tuesday. There is no middle road. There's no middle road. We all know this. This is the way it's going to go. He is either the greatest quarterback that ever lived, or, he'll be a graduate assistant for his dad, by September.
Right.
But,
No overreaction, right?
yes, no overreaction be too big. No overreaction can be too small. But, the game is back. And, look, kids are going back to school. You folks in Ohio, I've seen the stuff today. Man, scrimmages are everywhere. So, I mean, football is in the air.
It
And
is.
it's very good to be back. Let's hope as good as we want to be to the Cleveland Browns, that the Cleveland Browns are maybe that good to us in return. I
Yeah.
think we all agree our expectations are not maybe that high this year, but that doesn't mean that they still can't satisfy the itch here. And certainly some of that would be, you know, some of this young talent taking the next step up. And this just isn't the rookie class. You know, a guy like Jawan Briggs, certainly, on that defensive tackle room. And, Brad mentioned, the Isaiah McGuire, Alex Wright, and of course, Joe Tryon being here as well. And, Cam Thomas, who, certainly a guy who's trying to battle in that defensive end room as well. So that's kind of where we're here, obviously, tonight. Gonna, basically putting them out, seeing what, can come of something. Let's hope we get a little fun here, and get a little excitement. Carolina, I don't know what, playing their starters. I don't know what to make of that. That could mean 5 snaps. So I mean, who knows? And if that's what they choose to do, that's what they choose to do.
Yeah.
Just yesterday you saw certainly some instances why maybe not necessarily playing your starters. And then you can go even one worse. And a team that I think was really going to be great this year, the Los Angeles Chargers, gave their franchise left tackle $120 million and lost him basically 90 minutes later.
I know.
So, let's get out there. Obviously everybody is excited. Everybody is ready to go. Um, I think, and certainly, when it came to the point where it was going to be Shador, this just went from, hey, it's the Browns' first preseason game. Everybody's excited to where this is almost feels like, everybody's ready for the where were you on
Yeah.
August 8th, 7 o'clock, when the Shador Sanders experience let loose on Cleveland.
Which, as crazy as some of the nonsense around all of this has been, the conspiracy theory and, all that around Shador, this is the fun part of having him here. So let's enjoy that, right? So.
Look, and look, this young man is certainly capable of making some noise in this Cleveland Browns quarterback room. He
Yeah.
absolutely is. And to his credit, I I'm certain that somebody will get him one point where he's going to talk about everything, the draft process, and certainly what's gone on the last couple of weeks. And even as I said yesterday, all these national pundits right now, all of a sudden, the Browns are sabotaging him. They're setting up to fail. No. Shador Sanders doesn't need your help now. He's in the position where he's going to make it on his own. He needed you all in April. That's when he needed you all. When things were going spiraling out of control and everybody was just getting their shots off. He's in a position now. So first round pick, second round pick, third round pick, fourth round pick, none of that matters. He's
Right.
got the ball in his hands. He controls his own destiny. And the lineage, the bloodlines that he comes from tells you he can probably pull it off. I'm
Yep.
not guaranteeing anything, but to believe that Shador Sanders can't succeed in the NFL for whatever reasons that went on to this point, none of it matters. None of
Yep.
it matters. He's here, ball in his hands, like it has been probably since he was 8, 9 years old, having his father around him. And one of the things that I talk about that I don't think anybody else talks about is you played for your dad. Look, I've been around kids who dads were the coaches. It wasn't always the best experience. It wasn't always the best. It ain't easy being a coach's son. So now here he is. And look, there's certainly things with Cleveland, and I'm sure they, hey, I know this is the way you were doing it with dad, and this is the way we're going to do it here.
Yeah.
And the Browns are not going to like tweak anything to, because they're going to sabotage, because they want to try to get the best out of them. That's it. And, anybody to think otherwise is just absolutely just wasting their time with their thumbs, printing things out on a computer. You're just wasting your time. It's his
Yep.
time. He's earned it. He's here. And we're all just going to sit back and see where it takes us.
Yep. I'm with you, brother. Fired up. Let's do it. We'll be
Let's
back
do it.
here afterwards, right after the game for post-game show. So make sure you tune in then as well.
Absolutely. Talk to y'all in a few hours.